You are sitting across a table from a friend in a violently loud room. Let us call it a crowded Friday night bar, or a concert venue, or a subway platform as the express train screams past. The music is deafening, the bass is vibrating in your chest, people are shouting over each other, and the air is thick. You need to leave. You have to work early, or the vibe is just off, or the guy at the next table is being entirely too weird. But you cannot shout over the noise. So, what do? You catch your friend's eye. You raise a single eyebrow. You do a minuscule, almost imperceptible tilt of your head toward the exit. Your friend looks at you, reads the tension in your jaw, follows the microscopic flick of your pupils, gives a slow, deliberate blink, and nods. You both stand up and walk out. Look at what just happened. You just communicated a highly complex, multi-layered paragraph of information. I am uncomfortable. The situation here is degrading. I want to leave right now. Are you ready to go with me? And your friend replied, I understand. I agree. I am ready. Let us initiate the exit protocol. All of that, and neither of you made a single sound. Not a single word was spoken. And here is the strange part. We think of this as a backup plan. We think of non-verbal communication as a poor substitute for actual language. Something we use only when the music is too loud or the mouth is full. We think of language, spoken words, syntax, grammar, dictionaries, as the thing that makes us human. But here is a question nobody actually asks. What if it is the exact opposite? What if language is just the thin layer of fresh paint on a house that was built hundreds of thousands of years ago? How did our ancient ancestors communicate before the very first word was ever spoken? Not as in, did they grunt? Obviously they made sounds. But we are talking about complex life or death communication. How do you plan a hunt, teach a child to build a tool, warn a friend, or grieve a loss, when your species literally has not invented words yet? Is there an internal monologue if there is no vocabulary to speak it with? What is it like to be trapped inside a mind that understands the world but cannot name a single piece of it? What if we are wrong, and they were just mute, isolated animals wandering the plains? Or what if we are right, and there was a rich, invisible web of silent communication holding them together? A language we have mostly forgotten how to speak. And this is the rabbit hole we are going down today. Buckle up, because this is about to get weird, and it is going to completely change how you look at every conversation you have for the rest of your life. Let us start at the very beginning. What does it even mean to talk without words? Let's start with the most obvious thing. When you picture a prehistoric human, say an early Homo sapiens or a Homo heidelbergensis from 300,000 years ago, you probably picture a hulking brute in a fur loincloth, grunting aggressively and hitting things with a club. Pop culture has done a real number on our perception of the past. We equate a lack of vocabulary with a lack of intelligence. But here's the thing. 300,000 years ago, these people were taking down mammoths. I want you to sit with that for a second. A mammoth is a creature the size of a double-decker bus, armed with tusks that can impale a car, and a hide thick enough to stop a modern bullet. You do not kill a mammoth by running at it and screaming. If you try that, you die. Taking down a Pleistocene megafauna requires military-level tactical coordination. It requires flankers. It requires drivers to push the animal toward a natural trap, like a ravine or a swamp. It requires timing, patience, and absolute synchronized precision among 20 or 30 hunters. And crucially, it requires absolute silence. If you yell out, "Okay, Bob, take the left flank," the mammoth runs. Or worse, the mammoth turns around and crushes Bob into the Pleistocene mud. So how did they coordinate? They used their bodies. They used pantomime. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer tribes, like the San people of the Kalahari, note that during a hunt they use an incredibly elaborate system of hand signals. They can communicate the species of the animal, its age, its gender, how fast it is moving, and how long ago it passed by, entirely through gestures. Our ancient ancestors were doing the same. They were speaking a complex, full-body sign language. But hunting is just the immediate present. Let me throw you something even wilder. How do you teach someone a skill without using words? Back in the deep past, over 1 million years ago, our ancestors, like Homo erectus, created the Acheulean hand axe. This was the smartphone of the Stone Age. It is a beautiful, symmetrical, teardrop-shaped piece of stone, and creating one is incredibly difficult. You have to strike a core of flint with another stone at the exact right angle, with the exact right force, knowing that the flake that falls off is not the tool. The tool is what is left behind in your hand. You have to hold a 3D blueprint of the finished object in your mind and carefully chip away everything that does not belong. If I gave you a rock and a piece of flint right now, you couldn't do it. You would just smash your fingers. So, how did an ancient elder teach a young hominid to make this high-tech survival gear? They couldn't say, "No, hold it at a 45-degree angle and strike with a glancing blow." They used what cognitive scientists call over-imitation. The elder would sit in front of the learner and exaggerate their movements. They would slow down the strike. They would make deliberate eye contact, perform the motion, and then look at the learner's hands. They were pantomiming the future. And it worked. The Acheulean hand axe remained the primary technological tool of our ancestors for over 1 million years. 1 million years of continuous cultural transmission, passing down the exact same engineering blueprint across thousands of generations, largely in total silence. Yes, exactly that. 1 million years of silent schooling. But if you think pantomime and hand gestures are the whole story, you are underestimating just how strange human biology really is. Because to make those silent signals work, evolution had to radically redesign our faces. So here is where the story takes a sharp turn. Look in a mirror, or better yet, look at the eyes of the person sitting next to you. Notice the whites of their eyes, the sclera. We take this completely for granted. Of course, eyes have whites. But here is the bizarre biological truth. Humans are the only primates on Earth that have white sclera. Every other primate, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, has dark sclera. Their eyes are mostly brown or black all the way across. If you have ever looked a gorilla in the eye at a zoo, which, by the way, you really should not do, they view it as a threat and they hate it. You will notice you cannot easily tell exactly where the gorilla is looking. Evolution did this on purpose. For a chimpanzee, gaze direction is a secret. If a chimp finds a delicious piece of fruit hidden in the canopy, the last thing it wants is for the other chimps to see what it is looking at. If they see, they will steal it. So, dark eyes act as camouflage. It is a mechanism for keeping your thoughts to yourself. Humans did the exact opposite. Around 2007, a developmental psychologist named Michael Tomasello, working at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, proposed something called the cooperative eye hypothesis. Tomasello argued that at some point in our evolutionary history, we made a terrifying trade-off. We lost the camouflage of our eyes. We evolved bright white sclera so that anyone looking at us could instantly, from a distance, tell exactly where our pupils were pointed. Let that land. We biologically re-engineered our faces to leak our private thoughts to the group. Why on earth would we do that? In the wild, this is a massive risk. If a predator is stalking you and you look at it, the predator instantly knows it has been spotted. We made ourselves violently vulnerable. But we gained something far more powerful than stealth. We gained the ability to read each other's minds. Because we have white eyes, you can track my attention. If I suddenly widen my eyes and stare over your left shoulder, you don't need me to say, "Look behind you." Your brain automatically follows my gaze. We do this involuntarily. We share attention. Tomasello proved this with a brilliant, simple experiment. He had a human experimenter sit in front of a chimpanzee, look up at the ceiling, and do nothing else. The chimpanzee ignored the human. Then, the experimenter did the same thing with a human infant, about a year old, long before the baby could speak. The experimenter looked up at the ceiling. The baby instantly looked up too. The baby's brain is hardwired to assume, if you are looking at something, it must be important, and I need to see it too. This is the birth of the shared mind. Before we ever shared a spoken word, we shared the visual world. We survived not by being the strongest, but by having 20 pairs of eyes wired to the same network. But tracking a gaze is passive. What happens when you want to actively control what someone else is looking at? And this brings us to the single most mind-blowing piece of evidence in the entire story of human communication. Look at your hand right now. Seriously, look at your index finger. Extend it. Pointing. It is the most mundane, everyday gesture in the world. You point at a menu item in a cafe. You point at a dog in the park. You point the way to the restroom. But pointing is an evolutionary miracle. You will say, come on, that is just a reflex. Animals do it. My dog understands pointing. Okay, let's unpack that. Yes, your dog understands pointing. If you point at a dropped piece of cheese on the floor, your dog will run over and eat it. But your dog understands pointing because we spent 30,000 years artificially breeding dogs to pay attention to humans. A dog is essentially a genetically modified wolf designed to read human body language. But what about our closest living relatives? What about chimpanzees? They share nearly 99% of our DNA. They can use tools. They can wage war. They have complex political alliances. But in the wild, chimpanzees do not point to share information. Back at the Max Planck Institute, researchers ran another set of experiments that genuinely melt your brain. They took a chimpanzee and put it in a room with two opaque buckets turned upside down. Under one bucket, they hid a piece of food. The chimp didn't know which one. A human researcher sat in the middle and pointed clearly and enthusiastically at the correct bucket. The chimpanzee looked at the researcher, looked at the pointing finger, and then just randomly guessed. The chimpanzee's brain simply cannot compute the intention behind the gesture. The chimp is thinking, why is this ape holding his hand out like that? Is he trying to touch the bucket? To a chimp, communication is almost entirely imperative. It is a command. Give me that. Move over. Groom me. Now, do the exact same experiment with a human toddler, a 14-month-old baby who cannot say a single word. You hide a toy under a bucket. You point at the bucket. The baby immediately goes to the correct bucket. Why? Because the human baby possesses a superpower called shared intentionality. The baby's brain automatically processes the gesture and thinks, this larger human knows something I don't know. He is pointing because he wants me to know it too. He is trying to help me. Even wilder, human babies point for us. Long before they can talk, a baby will point at a bird out the window and look back at you to make sure you saw it. They don't want you to fetch the bird. They don't want to eat the bird. They just want you to experience the bird with them. It is an epistemic hunger, a hunger to know that we are experiencing the same reality. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors walked the earth pointing out water sources, animal tracks, and approaching storms, building a massive shared database of knowledge entirely without a dictionary. But wait, if they had white eyes to read each other's gaze, and they had complex gestures to hunt, and they had pointing to share the world, were they just living in total silence? Was the Pleistocene Earth just a quiet movie with no soundtrack? No, they had voices, and what they did with those voices is perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire story. Okay, forget everything I just said about silence. Let's talk about sound. If you look at the fossil record, specifically at the hyoid bone in the throat and the base of the skull in our ancestors like the Neanderthals, you see that they had the physiological hardware to make complex vocalizations. They had deep, resonant chest cavities. They were not mute, but they probably didn't have words yet. No nouns, no verbs, no syntax. So what were they doing with all that vocal power? In 2005, an archaeologist named Stephen Mithun published a book called The Singing Neanderthals. He proposed that before humans had language, we had a communication system that he called It is an acronym: holistic, manipulative, multimodal, musical, and mimetic. Mithun argued that before we spoke, we sang. Think about how you talk to a baby today. You don't use flat, monotone dictionary definitions. You use motherese. You swoop your pitch up and down. Who's a good baby? Are you a good baby? The baby has no idea what a baby is or what good means. But the baby understands the melody. The high, swooping pitch means comfort and safety. A sharp, low staccato drop means warning or prohibition. No, stop. This is prosody, the music of speech. Mithun suggests that entire tribes of early humans communicated through a rich tapestry of musical humming, chanting, and pitch modulation. Picture this. You are sitting by a fire. It is 50,000 years before now. The hunt was successful today, but it was brutal. People are exhausted. The adrenaline is fading, leaving behind aching muscles and frayed nerves. Someone in the group starts to hum, a low, rhythmic vibration in the chest. Someone else joins in, matching the pitch, then another, and another. Soon, the entire tribe is harmonizing. They are using sound to synchronize their emotional states, to lower their heart rates, to release oxytocin, to bond the group back together after the trauma of the day. They used melody to soothe a crying infant. They used rhythmic, aggressive chanting to build courage before facing down a cave lion. They used a collective descending wail to express the unbearable grief of burying a child. They didn't have a word for sadness, or courage, or love. They didn't need one. They performed the emotion through song. Sound was not used to transfer data. Sound was used to manipulate the emotional reality of the group. And honestly, I get stuck on this fact every single time. The idea that long before the first tax document was ever debated, long before the first political speech, the valleys of prehistoric Earth echoed with the sound of human choirs, singing in the dark. But this is where we hit a wall. Gestures are brilliant. White eyes are a superpower. Humming and singing bind a tribe together with invisible threads of empathy. But these tools have a fatal flaw. You can point at a mammoth standing right in front of you. You can pantomime throwing a spear. You can sing a song to calm the fear in your chest right now. But how do you pantomime the concept of tomorrow? How do you point to a leopard that isn't there, but that you saw drinking by the river 3 days ago? How do you hum the idea of a valley you have never seen, but that your grandfather told you lies beyond the distant mountains? You can't. Gestures and melodies are prisoners of the present tense. They only exist in the now. Linguists call this barrier displaced reference, the ability to talk about things that are not physically present, to talk about the past, the future, the abstract, the invisible. To survive a rapidly changing climate, to coordinate larger and larger groups of humans across vast distances, we needed a key to break out of the prison of the present tense. We needed to invent arbitrary symbols. We needed a specific sound to mean a specific thing, even when that thing wasn't there. We needed to invent the word. But here is the part we don't like to talk about. When we try to imagine the very first word ever spoken by a human being, we tend to get romantic. We like to think it was something profound. A mother looking at her newborn and inventing a sound for love. A philosopher looking up at the night, all you want, your tribe cannot see your hand. In the dark, pantomime is a death sentence. And a beautiful, soothing melody isn't going to stop a leopard from dragging your sister into the trees. The honest answer is, we don't know exactly what the first word was. Sound waves don't fossilize. But evolutionary biologists and linguists look at other primates to give us a clue. Back in the 1980s, researchers Robert Seyfarth and Dorothy Cheney went to Africa to study vervet monkeys. They discovered something chilling. The monkeys didn't just scream when they were scared, they had specific, distinct acoustic sounds for specific predators. If a monkey spotted a martial eagle circling above, it made a low, grunting cough. Every monkey that heard it instantly looked up at the sky and dove into the thick bushes. If a monkey saw a leopard stalking through the grass, it made a sharp, rhythmic barking sound. The monkeys instantly scrambled up to the highest, thinnest branches of the trees where the heavy leopard couldn't follow. If a monkey saw a python in the grass, it made a high-pitched chutter. The monkeys all stood up on their hind legs and scanned the ground around their feet. They had a word for eagle, a word for leopard, a word for snake. Because responding to an eagle the way you respond to a leopard gets you killed. You need distinct syntax for distinct horrors. Our first words were almost certainly not star or love. They were alarm calls. They were sharp, harsh, arbitrary syllables violently forced out of human throats in the pitch black of night. Leopard, fire, run. Language, this beautiful, infinite, divine capacity that we use to write the works of Shakespeare, to declare human rights, to whisper in the ears of our sleeping children. This entire cathedral of human thought is built on a foundation of ancient, screaming panic. Our speech was born from the pure, paralyzing fear of being eaten alive in the dark. Sit with that for a moment. The very first time a human mind reached out to another human mind using a specific word, it was to name a monster. It feels dark. It feels like a bleak way to look at the greatest achievement of our species. But wait, let's look at that same coin from the other side. Let's think about what an alarm call actually is. Picture the scene again, the dark edge of the campfire. You hear the snap of a twig. You see the yellow reflection of eyes in the brush. A leopard is stalking the camp. From a purely selfish Darwinian perspective of survival of the fittest, what is the best thing you can do for yourself in that exact moment? Stay completely silent. Do not move. Let the leopard take the person sleeping closest to the edge of the fire and use that distraction to slip away into the dark. If you make a sound, you draw the predator's attention directly to you. You paint a target on your own chest. So why did we scream? Why did we invent a sound to warn the others? Because we couldn't bear to let them die. Yes, the first word was born of terror, but the fact that the word was spoken out loud, the fact that a human being risked their own life to push air through their vocal cords to warn the tribe, means that the first word was also an act of profound, radical sacrifice. It was the ultimate evolutionary rebellion. We looked at a brutal, cold, food chain-driven world and we said, "No, I am not surviving this alone. We survive together, or we don't survive at all." The invention of words was not just an upgrade in data transfer, it was an expansion of empathy. When you pointed in the daytime, you wanted to share the world. When you yelled the alarm call in the dark, you wanted to keep your people in the world with you. Every single time we named a threat, we mapped the environment, we tamed the unknown, and we built a fortress of shared knowledge that eventually pushed the predators back into the shadows for good. We talked our way to the top of the food chain, not with teeth or claws, but with the invisible, unbreakable bond of shared meaning. And that changes everything. It means that language is not just a tool, it is the architectural blueprint of human care. We are the ape that learned to speak because we realize that the mind of the person sitting next to us is just as valuable, just as real, and just as worthy of protection as our own. Which brings us right back to where we started. You are sitting in that violently loud bar. The music is still deafening. The crowd is still pushing against you. You catch your friend's eye, the raised eyebrow, the head tilt, the silent agreement. You both stand up, push through the crowd, and walk out into the cool night air. The sudden quiet of the street washes over you. You take a deep breath. You look at your friend as they pull out their phone to order a car, and you say, "Text me when you get home." It is a mundane phrase. You say it on autopilot, but now you know what is actually echoing inside those words. It is the exact same impulse from 300,000 years ago, spoken across the embers of a dying fire. It is the ancient, unbroken promise of our species. I see the dark out there, and I need to know you survived it. We didn't just learn to speak to describe the world. We learned to speak to hold each other tightly while we walk through it. If you've got a dog, try the pointing experiment I mentioned earlier. Point at a toy across the room, and tell me in the comments, did they look at the toy, or did they just stare at your finger? I genuinely want to know if the wolf genetics or the human domestication wins out in your house. I read these, and if you want to keep looking at the ordinary things in your life, a simple gesture, the whites of an eye, a Friday night conversation, and seeing the deep, ancient magic hiding right beneath the surface, hit subscribe. Join us. There is always another rabbit hole waiting. Until next time, keep your eyes open, and text someone when you get home.